Okay, so we got a couple more water tanks. So I am going to hook up all the water tanks with all of the fittings for a hose connection, as well as the actual larger ball valve for the full flow, and then also a T so that we can run a 1-inch line out of it as well, so that when we're ready we can hook all of the tanks to a 1-inch line that we can either trade off on tanks, or we can hook them all into a manifold, and then that will supply the house. So let me go over what we've got. So first off, coming right out of the tank is going to be a 2-inch. So we're going to have a 2-inch to a 2-inch slip. From that, we've got a short piece of 2-inch, just a regular 2-inch ABS. That's going to go straight into that one. That's going to glue into that. And then from the 2-inch, I go down to 1.5 inches because a 2-inch ball valve and an 1.5 inch ball valve are like 20-30 bucks difference. And when you're doing quite a few tanks, it adds up pretty quick. Also, the 1.5 inch ball valve is a little easier to manage. They're a little softer to turn and things like that, not as much friction and such, so it's not wearing as much on that joint that's in that bulkhead fitting. So anyway, the reducer down to 1.5 inches. And then from that 1.5 inches, I know this sounds like ridiculous because there's so many like pieces to it, but this is kind of how you have to do it. Anyway, and then 1.5 inches slip to male threaded, going into that. That will then screw into my valve. And then for my valve, I will then have another one of those slips that's going to screw in there. From that part, I have my T. So this is a 3/4 inch thread, so that I can put a 3/4 inch spigot with a 3/4 inch garden hose thread on it. So we're going to go ahead and thread that on there just a little bit. And I like to face them as forward facing as I can, just so that, you know, everything's coming out the same direction. If you're trying to, you know, line up like lines and hoses and things like that, you can all do it in the same. And so this is actually going to kind of set on its side. This will go and slip and glue on top, so it's straight up the top here. This is the most important part. So this is my 1.5 inch to 1 inch reducer. So I slip that in the end there. It'll go a little further, obviously, and then lastly is the 1-inch cap for now. So I do a cap right now, like I said, so that later on, if I want to, I can put a 1-inch, just thread in a 1-inch barb, or another like 1-inch to 1-inch female, and hook a PVC line to it, whatever I want to do. Also, it's really nice to have this in the wintertime, because in the wintertime, when I use this and I have to, you know, I open up the valve, or actually closed. When I open up the valve, I use my hose to, you know, fill the camper or whatever I'm doing, you know, putting water out to the goats, the chickens, whatever it may be. I shut the valve off, close this valve. Well, the problem would be is if I just had, you know, a line just going to the spigot, is I would still have all that water right there, and that would cause a huge problem. And so what would happen is, you know, we'd freeze, and all of that would freeze up, crack all this PVC, bust it apart. We'd start square one. It would also damage the valve most likely. So in this case, what I can do is I can take out this cap, and the great news is when these tanks are full, they actually angle this down just slightly, which is perfect because it angles it down just slightly, so that I can pull that cap out. It drains all the excess water out because it's actually pretty darn smooth, and it actually has kind of a lip and a smooth gradual up, and so it's all the way smooth out there for best water flow. But I can take the cap out, drain out this entire part so that it's hollow. It's got nothing in it, nothing's gonna freeze, don't have to worry about anything. I actually leave the valve cracked a little bit so they can get make sure that, you know, air doesn't have issues, and vacuum and suction and whatnot. Anyway, and then all that's left is this part here. But the great news is also that we don't freeze typically past 8 inches. You can freeze up to 14 inches deep. But most of my tanks, I have dirt piled up along the sides as well. And so that helps with temperature regulation. In the wintertime, yes, the water does come out pretty darn cold. It is nowhere near freezing. It's more in the 40s, sometimes even in the 50s. If it's not been, if it's been in the mid 30s or 40s, that water's coming out 40s, 50s, which is kind of nice. But anyway, I'll put it together and show you guys how to do that. Okay, you may have seen that I had to stop for a second. Ran out of one of my silicone tapes, so I had to get another one. And then you also may have noticed that one of the things I did is I started to glue up one of the pieces and then kind of stopped at one point. It's because I remembered that you don't want to glue everything together right off the bat before you put it on, because then you're going to have to dig a hole out from under your fittings so that you can actually turn it and screw it in all the way, and then nothing's going to line up perfect. So if you do it in basically these three pieces, so the initial part that screws onto the tank, the valve and its slip joints, and then the front T and spigot part. The reason that is basically you can screw this in, and then everything else you can slip on perfect, right in line how you want it. Otherwise, like I said, you're going to be like halfway through a turn, and so your valve, instead of when you have it closed, it's going to be straight up and down. It's going to be like kicked off to the side or over this way, and it's just going to be a nightmare. And then if it's over this way, you can't put your spigot upright, because then when you try and open it, it's going to run into it. So anyway, so I did it this way, save a little time and frustration especially, and don't have to do any digging of dirt. So let me put that on real quick. that's that. So we'll let it dry a little bit. But one of the things, you know, a lot of people are probably going to ask is, hey, why the heck didn't you use all PVC or all ABS? Or, hey, that glue may not be, you know, rated to hold X amount of pressure, things like that. Well, that's the thing about it. So even, you know, even being a 2,500 gallon tank, these tanks aren't, you know, they don't have a whole lot of PSI. The biggest point of pressure is going to be back here, which is all PVC all the way to the valve itself. This is the Christie's Red Hot Blue glue, which actually does pretty decent with PVC as well as or PVC as well as ABS. But I've had multiple valves that we've done a crossover of the two, and had no issues with the glue or them, you know, playing happy together. The reason why we do ABS and PVC is not because I want to, but because I have to. So out here I can't necessarily get all of the fittings that I want, so like the reducers and the slip joints and with the threaded and everything like that, I can't get all of that in PVC, and I can't get all of the other pieces in ABS. So if I could pick one or the other and do the entire project, I absolutely would, but that's not a possibility. So the other question that somebody might ask is, oh, well, that's a lot of, you know, like, you know, pressure and especially, you know, leverage going on the bulkhead fitting here. That's absolutely true, especially if, you know, you're pushing down and things like that. So when you use this, especially for the first couple of months, this valve is going to be pretty tight, and so you have to support it as well when you open it up, so you have to be a little bit careful with it. And then of course, you know, like I said, like I do berm up. This one I still got to berm up the dirt on. Now that I've put on the fitting, I can put all the dirt bermed up against it to keep it a little more cooler. Also, that dirt will come up a lot closer on the bottom here to support this a little bit more as well. Yeah, this is the way I do it. I'll be doing another one here in a couple of weeks, just because these things are crazy expensive right now with everything going on. I mean, even these 3/4 inch spigots are getting to be pretty up there. I think they're, you know, 13, 14 bucks now. This one, luckily, you know, at True Value in town, they had a couple of different options. This is the Pro line. I've got a Pro line and a Jomar valve already on some tanks. Both have done the exact same as far as performance goes, and no issues with either one. The Pro line is actually the cheaper one, which is what this brand is, and that's the one that I've actually had the longest on our original tank, and I've never had an issue with it. So I went ahead and bought another one just because I have had good experience, and it's 43 bucks versus like 80 something bucks. So definitely makes more sense. Anyway, if you have any questions, let me know.